What a mess. But this is the perfect time of year when things in the garden start to slow down to rejuvenate or give a new look to some of the areas in the garden. And this year I'm looking at my bound gravel. Now this gravel path was laid about 25 years ago, and it is bound gravel from Smith's of Bletchington, and bound gravel is basically gravel with lots of fines in it. So it's got clay content in it, and then when you roll it, it sticks together. Now, because it's been down for so long and it's had bits of mud from people's feet coming over it, and because weeds grow in it and they haven't always been removed and you get moss, over time it does become quite messy. So what I've decided to do is to actually dig out a path down the middle, and you can see I've dug it out, and I'm going to lay these sets in a path all the way down the middle. And these sets are nice. These are Yorkstone sets. They're from Bennett's Reclaim, and they're tumbled. So you see that they're all 50mm on that side. I think they're 100 on that, and they're different size lengths. So I'm going to lay them in a staggered bond all the way down. Of course, we could have laid these sets the other way up. So we could have laid it with the flat side up, so they weren't so deep. So then they'd just be about that deep. But they look totally different, and I actually love the look of them end on. Of course, it takes far more sets to do it this way than flat, but it's your choice. And you can see they're tumbled and the edges aren't quite even. And this is a very popular thing now that they're doing with granite, with Yorkstone, with all sorts of stones. And as opposed to sawn, which would be a very clean look to the top, it looks much more aged, looks much older and softer. And they have these massive tumbling machines, and in it they put big flags or stone sets, whatever, and they tumble them around with bits of aggregate, and it creates this sort of river washed effect. So whenever I've made a mosaic and I've smashed up some plates or some terracotta to form the mosaic, it then has very sharp edges when you smash it. So what I've done is I put them in a cement mixer with some sand, and I just put the cement mixer going for about 2 hours, and then your plates, your terracotta, looks as though it's been in a riverbed for hundreds of years. It really does tumble the edges just as this. Now this is Yorkstone, which is a very durable stone. And when you choose any paving material, one of the top priorities is that it's going to be durable. And I have bought in the past reclaimed bricks, which look beautiful and old. You lay them, and then after a winter or 2 winters, the frost actually causes them to split. So they absorb water, and then when it freezes, as it freezes, it expands, and then it bursts the tops. So when you're buying reclaimed materials, you need to know that it's a durable material, and that is quite difficult with a brick, to know that it's going to be durable. With a stone, Portland stone, I always thought was pretty durable, but then when I was at the War Memorial monuments the other week recording, they had a lot of Portland stone, and they'd done these massive monuments, but a lot of it was splitting in the frost. So different stone types have different amounts of durability and have different amounts of frost resistance. And also when you have a quarry, certain beds of the quarry, usually the lower beds, I think, are much less durable than some of the higher ones, but different beds will vary in frost resistance. So you need to make sure that where you buy it from, that it is guaranteed to be frost proof. And here, Yorkstone is certainly frost proof, as I see it, across the whole of the UK, down to USDA 7 and lower. So it's a great material, and I'm really pleased with this. So what I did is I dug out the trench. I do the grunt work, and Dave will come and do the more clever bit of the laying. And because it had the base as well underneath the gravel, because the bound gravel was just 50mm, 2 inches on the top, I had a lot of stuff dug out with bits of big clinker in it. So what I did is I made this lovely little sieve set up, and I put it on there, and then this sieve is just like a metal, this was a sample metal panel of metal trellis, 3mm metal trellis that I made up for a job to show the client. And then I put 2 layers of chicken wire of different sizes on it, just to give the sort of size sieve holes I wanted. And this works really well. And what I do is these big chunks that I've got left, when you've done, it doesn't take very long to do it, to be honest. It looks like it's a time-consuming job, but it didn't take me. It took me about a couple of hours to do most of this. And then I got the big chunks, which I then put in a bucket and I tip into holes in the drive. And then underneath you have the finer, proper self-binding gravel without the big chunks like that, which is fine for me. So then what I've done, as you can see, I've put buckets of the finer stuff all the way down. And when Dave's laid these sets, we'll then put that nice cover on top of the path. So we'll have the nice Yorkstone sets, then we'll have the nicer gravel either side. And I will let plants grow in that. I want things to self-seed into it, but I just want it to look a bit cleaner and less of a dirty gravel path and more of a useful, interesting gravel path. As to the hazels, we did have lots of big multi-stem hazels down here, and I like them, but I trained them into archways, which was fine, but the problem was keeping those stems clean, because hazels are always producing shoots from the bottom, meant that they got very big and fuzzy unless I came and sort of cleaned them up every 2 or 3 weeks, which was just a bit of a pain. So we've chainsawed all the hazel clumps down, and I planted these maybe 30 years ago. And to stop them reshooting, which they will do obviously, I put these Ecomax plugs into the top. So you just screw a hole, push them in, or screw them in, and then maybe hammer as well. And then those will slowly release the weed killer into the stump, and that will kill them off. And so in their place, I've actually got these hornbeams. And I got these as feathered whips from my supplier W, and they've cost me £30 each. I'll plant them, and as you see, I'll tie one over each end of the arch, 2, so 1 on each side. So I've got 12 altogether, and I'm going to plant them. I'm actually going to put them in baseless pots, because a lot of them will have hazel stumps by their roots, and they'll be planting sort of into the root zone of the hazel. And I just think it's going to be quite a job to get them in there. And I think the stone pots that I got will be quite nice. So I'll put them either side, either end to make more of a feature. And then I'll clip them up, but I'll show you that later. So the next step, Dave's going to lay these down here. He'll put them on a little bit of mortar, maybe a 25mm mortar bed, 1-in-4 mortar bed. And then we will brush sand into the joints. Now, if you've got very clean, sharp joints, modern slabs without being tumbled, what can happen is if you butt them up totally tight together, the edges can become chipped, which when you've got a clean slab looks a bit messy. So you would always tend to then to put maybe a 3mm joint in that to stop that happening. But with these, because they've got a tumbled edge, I'm just going to leave a sort of 1-2mm gap and then just brush some sand into the top. So now Dave's laid most of the path, and I really like the gentle curve that follows the original gentle curve of the path that we laid whenever it was, 20-something years ago. And he's actually bedded them on about 25mm of mortar, a 1-in-6 sand cement mortar, or cement sand mortar, and then he's just tapped them in, and then when they're finished and dry, he then put in the sand, the jointing sand. This is kiln dried sand, and it's a very fine sand, And the reason it's kiln dried is if it was wet, it wouldn't fit in between the joints. And you just literally sprinkle it on the top and then brush it in. Obviously don't do it when it's a wet day. You see it just disappears down the holes. Don't do it on a wet day, and don't leave it in the rain. Just put a bit on and then you brush it in. And you'll see you might need to go back and brush it up in again. It's amazing, I always think how much it actually takes to do that. So you just brush it in like that, and I'll probably come back and do a bit more and then brush it off. And you can see how lovely it looks with all the sand in the joints. It doesn't say looking so fresh and clean for very long, but it's a very nice look. And then I've got the gravel which I took off and sieved before, and I'm just going to push it down the edges either side. I'll do that in a second. Before I do that, I've been planting the hornbeam arches either side all the way down, and I've just got the last two to go. Now we've taken the bases out of the pots, and you can just see here, I've put a bit in. You can just see how we've taken them out roughly at the bottom. So there's a decent sized hole there. And then I'm going to put the feathered hornbeam in. And I've put the actual arch post running into the pot so I can get the plant nice and close to it, which I like. And then I will just pop it in. Now these are the nice feathered trees. Now they are nicely moist. They're container grown and quite stuck in the pot, this one. They're container grown and they never actually transplant as well as root ball usually, but I couldn't get them of this size root ball. Right, I'm just going to do a bit more stuff with it to get it out. There we are. Now look at those roots. They are what you would call slightly root bound. So you can either spade it down the sides with the spade. So I just get the spade and go doink, 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 doink. Or you can cut it with a secateurs. It always seems very brutal when you do this, but it is really important. And what happens is it just stimulates those root hairs to grow out. Because this is quite bad, I think I might spade it as well actually. But you see they've got these really stout canes on them, which I've cut off the ties in redness, and I'll obviously remove because it doesn't need it. Just see what the bottom's like. Bottom is not too bad, it's obviously changed. So I hope I've got enough topsoil in here. Now it isn't actually topsoil. What I've put in here is a mixture of digestate and bark, and it's not quite deep enough, so I'm just going to put a bit more in. The other advantage of putting them in pots is obviously it makes them much, much higher. So it lifts them up and makes them look more imposing. So let's just get another load in there to lift it up. Put a bit more in. I'm going to take post out carefully. Jolly nice bamboo canes. Have a reuse of those, I'm sure. That's better. And it's always worth facing a plant in a situation like this. So I'm going to pull it round later So I want to make sure I've got it so I've got lots of nice vertical branches on the outside, more than against the post really, I think. So now I'm going to move the barrow back and just pop those in. They're really nice sized trees. That one is actually bigger than some of the others by quite a way. And obviously as soon as it's in, I'm going to soak it. Even though it's a dormant season pretty much, I'll give it a good soak because I don't want it to dry out in the winds. We've had phenomenal storms in the last few days, and it will desiccate, it will lose moisture from its branches and leaves and things like that. And I'll just push it well down, and then I'll do the same with the other. And I'll use the black tubing wire to tie it in with. I never like them too high in the pot. I like a bit of room so that when you water them, it all does go round. And I'll obviously push it right down in the gap around the edges, so you've got a really good contact. But basically these roots are going to go down after the water. So when I water it, I'll give them a good soak. I'll probably give them 2 2-gallon cans at a time. And I'll probably only, so say we get a very dry snap in April, May when the leaves are out, I will probably soak it weekly to start with about 4 gallons a week. And then I will slowly wean it off depending on the weather. And then usually in about 3 months from the start of spring, so say from April, May, June, July, I'll probably start really easing the water off in July. But obviously that depends on weather conditions, etc. But my aim is to water it infrequently and a fair bit, so that the roots really chase the water down, and the roots will follow the water. Now I'm going to just pull it in, and then obviously that moves it a bit. And I'll use this lovely black tubing wire, which I use, which is lovely stuff. It comes in all different colours and things. And I'll just tie it on with that. And then when I've done that, and I'll bend the top round. And when you're training a tree like this, it is really easy to form archways with trees and things. And I've made some with some yew in places, and then I just put a cane, a horizontal cane, where I want the arch to go, between the 2 end yews, as it were, and I just pull the branches over. Now this tubing wire does expand, and it doesn't cut into it, which is why it's nice. And then I'll need to go and get the ladders to tie it round on the top bit. And then, having watered it in, I will just cut the sides back. And I'll just cut them back, because everywhere I cut, it will make the tree branch out. And so I'll get I want a nice caterpillar of green to go all the way round from the bottom to the top. Now, if I took these side limbs right back to where they meet the trunk, that might not be good, because that would possibly stop another branch growing there. So I'll just cut them back by about 2/3, like that, all the way around. And then I'll get nice bushy green caterpillars, I hope, next spring. So the next thing is to put the gravel back by the path. I'll just push the gravel back, and then my archway is there. And the reason I think this looks nicer, even like this, when I haven't quite finished it, than the hazel, is it's much lighter. And I can see from one side of the rose meadow to the other, and it just frames the view down to the meadow and back to the dovecote in a more concentrated fashion. The hazel were just too bushy, and they just needed to be kept cutting back. So I'm just going to pop the gravel down the side so you can see how it looks, and that will just freshen it up. I'll let plants grow either side, obviously. That will look nice. And it's quite a simple job to do this. I just put it in piles and then you just rake it. And this is the sieve gravel from before. That one. And then this one. They're wet. It's been raining recently. And so they're wet and heavy. And it's such a difference. So I'll just roughly position it and then I'll rake it in place down the entire path. Come on. That's it. And I could roll it if I wanted to. There's a tree tie there. But because this has got clay fines in it, it probably would benefit from a little roll. But you see, it looks so lovely when it's freshly laid. It's lovely stuff. So, basically, there we are. That's the path. Now, a very sad event happened yesterday. And my lovely dog Beatle, little Jack Russell, who I'm sure you've seen in the videos, who's been with us for a good 14 years, and she's had puppies and things here, and she sadly died. She just got old age, basically very stiff and not particularly happy. So we decided, in order to remind us, we would call this Beatle's Path. And that means every day I walk up and down, look at the cattle sheep, I will think of my lovely Beatle. Anyway, I hope you liked the path and I hope you enjoyed seeing pictures of Beatle in the past. And if I don't see you again, happy Christmas.